أعوذ بالله من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين وخاتم النبيين سيدنا ونبينا وشفيعنا أبي القاسم محمد ثم الصلاة والسلام على آله الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين أما بعد فقد قال الله تعالى وتبارك في كتاب المبين وهو أصدق القائلين بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم لا تظلمون ولا تظلمون. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Brothers and sisters of Islam watching this program, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us in very few brief words what our role should be in life. And one of them is be a helping hand and a console to those who have been oppressed, and do not side with the oppressor. Zalim and Mazloom are the two words used. What happened 1400 years ago or more, that is possible and present today. Our endeavor is to make sure that the true spirit and the message of Karbala is shared with you, the Sameen, the audience today, to ponder upon the teachings of the Quran and looking through the prism and the eyes of the Hadith. We want to make sure that we go away after these 10 days of Muharram with a tablet of certain rules in our lives that we can put down in our own words and minds and hearts what we are going to do for the rest of the year. Let us build a motto and live up to it. Imam Husayn alayhi salam built a motto for himself and his companions in Karbala, and that motto was Amal bil Maruf, Nahi anil Munkar. It is that means to say, it is our bound duty on every individual that we perform Amal bil Maruf, Nahi anil Munkar. We, as a duty, our duty to our brothers and sisters, whoever may be, to make sure that we help them not to go astray, but we help them and hold their hands to remain fast in the lane, on the line of truth and the Sharia that Islam has given us. To discuss this, I have today at Mehndi Institute, as I have said before, a young brother of ours, Shaykh Arif, who has dedicated his life to the teachings of Islam and sharing that knowledge to the young pupils who join this institution. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give him and his students at this hawza, at this massacre, at this institute, the guidance to gain knowledge from the door and the house of Al-Bad. Ana Madinatul Ilm Waliyun Babuha. To share these thoughts and aspirations of ours for the spirituality of Muharram, Karbala, is our learned scholar, Brother Chris Syed, to whom my first question is, how can something that happened 1400 years ago provide us the spirit, the light, the fragrance, the beat of the drum beat within our hearts 1400 years after in today's modern day and age? Either a very simple question, Chris, or a tough one. But I'm sure you have read through the books of knowledge, and I'm sure will be able to enlighten us with your answer.
I think I will just confine myself to two simple answers. The first one is that these events only appear to be 1400 years ago in our eyes.
Yes.
They don't appear that way in God's eyes. Because God is outside of time, outside of space, beyond those confines and limitations. Therefore, the field of Karbala is eternally present in the sight of God. And therefore, those events have their impact in the lives of every generation. We also are eternally present in the sight of God because we contain the Spirit of God, the Ruh that was breathed into us, which enables us to make a communication with the divine. Therefore, we are on every day, at every moment of every day, living the eternal present of Karbala. Secondly, the events that we commemorate in these days are not one-off events in human history. They are, sadly, the kind of events that repeat themselves over and over again in human history. They are, we can say, some of the tragedies of humanity,
yes,
which are writ large on the field of Karbala. And therefore, we must be looking today in our world, in our experience, to see how those are reflected.
Well, reflected they are, because when we try to learn any history book of any nation, history just does not relate that a king came, conquered the land, and did this. From that history, every student is taught to study it, see it, and come to a conclusion. Not just to say the comings and going. It is not a door in and a door out. History is taught for great importance that we learn lessons from history. History teaches us many things. But as Chris says, there are certain history that remain confined to the books. But there are certain episodes in history which were alive then, which are alive today, and which will be alive and fresh in people's minds and heart tomorrow. We will never forget how Noah, Hazrat Noah al-Islam, in his 950 years or so of life, suffered. So much so that by the evening he used to be covered by the stones that people threw at him. And in night, dead of night, Hazrat Jibreel, Gabriel, would come and remove the stones. We know how Moses suffered, Hazrat Musa Islam. We know how Hazrat Abraham suffered. We know Hazrat Isa Islam, Jesus suffered. We know how much pains and agony our great Prophet himself had to go through. So certain things are never forgotten. The spirit of Karbala teaches us to live our lives so that we too, if the moments come in our life to face such challenges, then we will be not only physically, morally, spiritually, and in an enlightenment, knowledge-wise, be prepared how to face those calamities, those trials and tribulations, and come out with head high in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that we have done our duty. Done our duty. Each of those prophets did their duties, fulfilled them meticulously in the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If that is the spirit of Karbala, then how can we prepare ourselves? Because when we go to what you call an annual marathon race that takes place in various cities, right? Or we are going on a cycle. Everything we do, we have to get ourselves prepared to kit ourselves out. What are the kits required and how can we prepare them?
I think that an important tool in our preparation is to reflect upon our own lives, because each one of us, hopefully, has some at least of the characteristics of Imam Husayn. And each one of us, unfortunately, has some of the characteristics of Yazid.
So there are two, within inverted comma, polarities.
There are two polarities within the human being, like a positive and a negative, or the earth and the positive. If we're wiring a plug, there are these two elements. Now, the days of Muharram are not just days to remember those events, they are days also to reflect upon ourselves and to ask, how should our lives be changed more properly, more adequately, as it were, to elevate and develop our own Hussain characteristics and to suppress and diminish our unfortunate Yazid characteristics. So if we look at these two poles, we can see something of the perpetual human struggle. The struggle between good and bad, light and darkness, between doing what we know is right and submitting to sin. These are elements that run through every human being throughout the centuries.
If we look at that element to test us whether which poles our minds and hearts are, unfortunately there is Shaitan, the Satan. And he tells us, look, try this, not too bad, it just gives you an experience. He tried it with Adam, Hazrat Adam Islam, and he tries that with each of us in our lives. If we look at our little brothers and sisters who go to schools, right, unfortunately, as they grow older and older, try this, this is hashish, try this, this is a harmless drug, try this, this is just a spirit and a wine or whatever, right? But when all these are put before us, very nicely packaged and delivered from the spirit of Karbala, how can we help our young little brothers and sisters in their lives to have that grit, to have that backbone, to have that determination, to have that willpower, that as Hussain stuck to his motto, Amar bil Maruf, Nahi anil Munkar, I will stick to the good that Allah has provided. How can we prepare them? It looks almost impossible when we look at the internet, when we look at the advertisement and the books and the everything that is available. It looks for modern day and age parents impossible, within inverted comma, to control their kids.
If we go back to the different steps that you were mentioning a few minutes ago, we have first of all the question of knowledge. Now, people need to know.
Very good, yes.
We have to teach people what is good and what is not good, what is wrong. But in our age, especially in Western schools, children are not taught, believe the teacher because he has a beard. They are taught, ask questions for yourself, puzzle it out, why is it so? Now we must respond to that. We must teach them what they need to know to build up that package. Not just the answer, but also the process. So you mentioned, for example, hashish or other drugs. Why are these things wrong? Don't just tell me they are wrong, tell me why, help me to understand.
Yes.
So we need then to develop a way of building knowledge that is based around answering the questions why. That's the first element. Another element that you mentioned is that of the physical. See, if we are wanting to run or to jump higher or better than anyone else, there is physical discipline. What we eat, how much sleep we have, what exercise routine we follow, and such like. Now, we have these elements as well within our Islamic guidance for a way of life. We have not only the guidance of those things that are haram and those things that are halal, but again, we need to help people to understand, why has this been prohibited? Why is this acceptable for a human being? So in the physical realm. But also we need the discipline that comes, for example, through fasting. Because we need to focus on the whole of our Islamic life during these days of Muharram. And we think that fasting, the discipline that we associate with Ramadan, is a discipline that trains us physically. I know you're hungry, but you can tough it out. Learn to withstand your temptations. Become tough within yourself. You are tougher than your hunger. So we are training people physically in this way. The next dimension that you mentioned is the mental dimension. That is, people have got to get their heads in the right place. Their heads not only based on knowledge, but also based on the will. Before any action, we are told all actions are based upon the niyyah, the intention behind the action. We are to declare our niyyah before a day of fasting. We are to declare our niyyah before prayers. In this way, we are training our will, our mind. We are getting our minds in the right place. And then the fourth and final element that you mentioned in training is the element of training the spirit as well. Because our spirits are God-given, but they are like flames within us. You know, a flame can diminish if it's not fed properly. You need to give it the right oil or gas or substance on which it burns, otherwise it can diminish. This spiritual fuel then for our spiritual life is very important indeed. Spending time with tasbih.
So what you're saying is awakening.
Awakening the spirit within each one of us, fanning it to life and keeping it burning bright.
MashaAllah. Fanning it and keeping it burning bright. The 10th day of Muharram provides you to replenish and to re-equip and to, like the motor cars, service our nafs. our spirit. Allah, it is said, Man arafahu nafsahu faqad arafa rabbahu. The person who recognizes his nafs, his spirit, and works to strengthen this, is the one who will be closer to Allah, God Almighty. The spirit of Karbala provides every child, an adult, and even an elderly person to his last breath to do so. But most important thing is what Christ has just mentioned. It is the niyat. It is false to be praying to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, yet our niyat, that is intention, is to do this person a wrong, ghibat, to cheat that person, to abuse that person, to misquote somebody, from small to the large, right? Gunah hai kabira, gunah hai saghira. Karbala teaches us to live our lives not just on the battlefield, as a warrior. Our battles are fought within ourselves first, in our spirit, in our nafs, than in the true battlefields with guns, cannons, and tanks and weapons. And it is how we make ourselves stealth and strong with that spirit that gives us the backbone to stand to the adversaries in life. By adversaries, I mean the temptation this beautiful golden bird gives us. This temptation is like a golden cage. It glitters and looks beautiful from outside. Once you go in and you are trapped in, that door of the cage is shut. Now you are imprisoned. And then that beautiful cage, beautiful golden cage, is a trap for you. The Satan, Shaitan, wants us to enter that golden cage, and he wants you to lock in it, that you forever remain there. And we see in the spirit of Karbala, when you mentioned about one polarity of Imam Husayn Islam, I would like you to dwell upon the other polarity that puts us in that golden cage. And Yazid tempted many a people to give them that golden cage. Could you throw some lights upon the model of human weaknesses that Yazid personifies in himself?
First of all, we know that Yazid, according to all the books, Yazid was a man who had the arrogance of Iblis, because he chose to follow his own will and his own urges instead of the guidance of God. We know that he was a man who did not follow the Sharia. He did not follow it in his drinking habits. He drank alcohol. In his relationships with women, in his relationships with money. He did not pursue justice within his work. And so in all these ways, he chose to rebel against the Sharia which had been given him by God, laid down by the Prophet. Secondly, he was a weak character, a tyrant. A tyrant is someone who wants to impose their will on other people. And if you want to impose your will, you have to find mechanisms to use to make them do what you want. And so he would use bribery. He would use the temptation of advancement in the military. He would use the reward of new lands when they were gained, or new positions that could be given to people. And so he uses the base nature of someone. You will be more comfortable, your position will be elevated if you will do the dirty work for me. Yazid is someone who gives Hussain and his companions no way out. You know, every teacher, every parent knows that you mustn't allow a child to get into a corner when the child has no way out, because they cannot exit with human dignity. And this is what he does. Because you remember, he drives and he drives and he drives until the very last days on the field of Karbala. They are not to leave unless Imam Husayn publicly on the field of Karbala will declare his allegiance to me. He knows that that's not ever going to be possible. So he oppresses people even in this way. He denies the basic human requirements and the basic dignity of a human being. The first thing, you have brought many babies into the world. You know, the first thing that a baby needs is water. You need to wash the child. You have seen many people die. You will know that the last thing that a human being needs on this earth is the water for the washing and preparation, for shrouding and burial. To deny human beings water is the most fundamental human degradation.
Yes.
To cut them off on the field of Karbala from sources of water, to prevent them from digging wells, to use the weapon of thirst, not just amongst the adult males, the soldiery, we can say, not just amongst the women of the party, but also amongst small children. To use the weapon of thirst is human degradation. You will remember an episode in the life of Imam Ali. Imam Ali was very well known for his valor in single combat.
MashaAllah, yes, true.
He was sent out in combat against one of the opponent single combat fighters, and they had fought and they had fought, and he had overcome him. And he had him on the ground and was about to deliver the final blow. And the man from the floor spat in his face. And Imam Ali, we're told, put away his sword and walked away. And of course, the others from the Muslim community were saying, "What are you doing? You had him. He was on the floor. He was yours. Why didn't you kill him?" And Imam Ali's answer, you remember, is very important. He says, "You're right, I did win, and I would have killed him. If only I could have killed him before he spat in my face.
MashaAllah.
But after he spat in my face, I would have been killing him for all the wrong reasons." Now, respecting the human dignity, it's a crucial lesson in our own times too, and it comes all the way down through centuries. Imagine, who is the bravest person on the field of battle in our own times? I would answer, it's the two men who carry the stretchers and bring back the wounded from the field of battle. They go unarmed into the thick of battle to bring assistance, to bring aid, to bring comfort, to bring healing to those who have been injured.
True.
Huge bravery. So this degree of human respect is very important. You will remember that one of the commands of the Prophet, when he is sending people out to see off attacking groups, you are to offer no violence to those who have just thrown down their weapons.
So there are certain rules and norms of practices even on the field of battle.
Not even on the field of battle, especially on the field of battle.
MashaAllah.
Because here human beings are about to take responsibility the greatest responsibility any human can take, to kill another human being. What greater responsibility could there be? And you know, our Sikh brothers have a very important teaching here. They say, before you can become a soldier, you must be on the path to becoming a saint. Because you must have that inner spiritual discipline, that respect for the humanity of the other, before you can take the audacity to take the life of another human being. Now this is something, if we may think for a moment about the modern period, that we have lost in our modern conduct of war. Because we go into the 20th century with something like 93% of all the casualties of war being men in uniform. And by the end of the 20th century, we have something like 97% of the casualties of war being civilians, overwhelmingly women and children. Now what has happened? You have moved from two human beings in combat looking at each other.
Yes.
You now have aerial bombardment. I can fire a missile hundreds of miles away. You have the use of long-range artillery. You have the use of bombs delivered by aeroplanes. All kinds of sophisticated weapons which are indiscriminate in their use. Indiscriminate because they deprive the human being of their life and of the basic necessities of human living. Women, children, just as much as soldiers in the field of battle. We bomb the cities so that we will scare the civilian population. We blow up a village because there's somebody that we want in there. These are fundamental disrespect of the human position, the human dignity of human nature itself. And so when we're thinking about the Yazid characteristics, we need to think about the human depravity that has entered into our modern warfare. We have a doctrine which is spoken about today by the soldiers. It's called the doctrine of asymmetrical warfare. What that means is, my life is worth 1,000 of yours. So to protect the life of one of my soldiers, I am prepared to kill 1,000 on your side. And we can see that played out in all sorts of theatres of war. When one side the casualties are numbered in dozens, on the other side the casualties are numbered in thousands. This cannot be a way for human beings to conduct themselves. And we see that in the polarity of the characters of Yazid and Imam Husayn.
The polarity of the characteristics of our great Imam, Sayyid al-Shuhada, Abu Abdullah Imam Husayn al-Islam, and the characteristic of the shaitan, the Satan, of Yazid ibn Muawiyah. Our great brother here talked about even the etiquette of warfare, the rules of warfare. He says that use of undue force is not right. The Quran says to us, O people, when at warfare, use proportional reply, use the weapons, use the might proportionate to what has been thrown against you or after you. When just a few days ago we heard the president of a country speak that don't worry, we will enter to punish the immoral regime of so-and-so, but our soldiers will not set foot on that battlefield. Our soldiers will remain safe. It will be the populace, the population, the people, the soldiers, the houses, the buildings, the infrastructure of the enemy we will destroy. Our brother here, Chris, talk about there is a fairness, fair play even on the battlefield. When we hear of the abuses of prisoners taken, whether it's Abu Ghraib or the prisoners who are languishing in America, no matter how grave their crimes are, undisputable crimes they must have committed, but still, when you have taken captives, then there's a rule. Our great prophet, peace be upon him, Muhammad Mustafa sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and our Imam, on the battlefield, told to every companion of theirs, never chase a warrior never chase an opposing soldier if he's walking away from the battlefield. Never take the life of a warrior or an opponent soldier if he has laid down his weapons. And he showed the magnanimity, the greatness of a leader. When our great prophet was entering Mecca as a victor, in those days and age, when a city was captured, people were beheaded, prisoners were taken, women and children abused, that was the norm. The Meccans are shaking and shivering when they see the banner of Islamic army approaching Mecca. They think a calamity, a catastrophe is about to happen. Our great prophet shows us the way, how a victor should behave and how not to oppress the people who are weak and who are on the losing side. He comes to Mecca. He smiles to them. He makes sure that the Meccans have enough food to eat. But the people say, can we take prisoners now? He says, what for? The prisoners are brought. He says, right, you have been in prison? Oh, okay. What do you do? O Prophet of Islam, I'm a teacher. Well, that's a very good, noble profession. Release him, he will teach. Thus, every man has an important trade. And the Prophet of Islam releases them into the society. In those days, our Prophet did not say, take them and put them in a prison like Abu Ghraib and abuse their honor and dignity. The topic is the spirit of Karbala in today's modern day and age. Even in war of today, we should learn lessons. The other important thing our brother talked about is Yazid, the polarity. If we look at the polarity on the battlefield and others, but Chris, our boys and girls, our young brothers and sisters are caught between the pillar and the post. There is a beautiful thing, for example, like the internet. We read in papers about pornography, about children and others. And in that internet, I showed you, I have downloaded books that when I go on my pilgrimage to Ziyarat or Hajj, I carry with me in a little iPad hundreds and hundreds of books. But I could use that great internet facility for wrong purposes. There again, in instruments of modern discovery and science, there are polarities, isn't it? How can we tackle that and help our younger brothers and sisters to learn lessons from Karbala, to harness our willpower and our nafs in such a way that we do not fall prey to such evil deeds.
I think it's very important that adults take a responsibility. We are responsible for shaping the character of our young people. We are responsible for giving them the tools so that they can live the rest of their lives. And so I think very practical things. I know of several friends who only permit the computer to be in a public room, not, for example, in a bedroom where no one else goes. And in this public room, it should be turned in such a way that the screen is open and visible. There are devices, software, that one can have fitted to the computer to stop certain sites being opened by that computer. There are certain selections with pictures, for example, that certain pictures simply cannot be opened on that computer. If we don't understand these ourselves, then we must ask around for someone who does understand to come and help us to protect our children. We need sensitively and sensibly and at the appropriate age to talk about these things, because something that is forbidden without reason is something that is very easily broken. The Quran tells us again and again, I gave you a head, I gave you a brain, puzzle it out, ponder on these things. The ignorant ones are the ones who do not ponder on these things. And so we need to give our young people the right kind of guidance to think about them for themselves, because at some stage no one else will be looking over them. They will be alone with this tool in their hands. Will they use it for good or will they use it for ill? Only they can make that decision at that stage. But we need to equip them to make the right decision.
On the field of Karbala, they spent on the night of Ashura preparing themselves for the battle, for tomorrow to dawn. From the spirit of Karbala, it is our duty to learn for ourselves, to prepare ourselves, prepare our children, to prepare our community for the calamities and the catastrophes that can engulf us by the use of modern day tools and equipments, modern day facilities, modern day loose laws and governance of any society. Society can protect us, society can destroy us. Protect yourself that you take what is the best in society and leave what is not right. The spirit of Karbala makes us prepare for ourselves, and that's what we should do. Let me give you one single episode. How a father, mother, the rest of the family prepared themselves for the battle of Karbala. For a father, his dream, his future, his hopes, his strengths lie with the son who bears his name. And in the field of Karbala, Hussain has brought him with him his son Ali Akbar alayhi salam. In looks, his stature, physical stature, his voice, and everything, he is an image of the great Prophet himself. Imam Husayn would say, if I need to think of my grandfather, long to see him, I used to have a look at Ali Akbar's face. Ali Akbar knows the position he is, knows his great responsibility, knows he has to live up, not just with the look of the Prophet, but he knows he has to live up to the spirit of the great Prophet. A lot of warriors have gone. Ali Akbar is there. He says, Father, give me the permission to go to battle. And Ali Akbar, father says, Hussain alayhi salam says, Ali Akbar, you are asking your father to give you permission to go to battle? Ali Akbar, you are my hope, you are my strength, you are my dreams like any other father would have. Oh Ali Akbar, how can you ask me? Ali Akbar begs Imam Husayn to let him go to the field. Very reluctantly, very sadly, Imam Husayn gives Ali Akbar the permission to go to battle. And when he goes to the battle, the enemies can see that he is fighting with the spirit of Ali. His name is Ali Akbar, and he is battling with the spirit of Ali. He's surrounded by soldiers, but the spirit of Ali Akbar is so strong that he chases them to the right at the end of the field. The enemies are run from him single-handed. Once they have run, he looks back at his old father waiting there. He says to himself, let me say how my father is. Ali Akbar comes to his father, Imam Husayn sees his father's in his father's eyes, the hopes and the images a father would have at looking at his son. And Ali Akbar, to keep a conversation going, Father, I am thirsty. Is there a drop of water? And in desperation, what does Imam do? He takes his ring out from his hand and he says, Oh Ali Akbar, this is not a drop of water. Put this ring in your mouth that it might help you. It doesn't. Ali Akbar mounts again to go to the battle. He goes to the battle. He is this time surrounded by the enemies on all sides. And he fights. But the enemies are in front of him, on the sides of him, and behind him. And he receives a spear that pierces through his chest. He falls to the ground and says, Oh Father, come and help me. You just imagine a father helplessly waiting on the sideline of the battlefield, hears the voice of his son, Father, adrikni, adrikni. Before Imam Husayn al-Islam's eyes, there is darkness. Physically, he finds he has lost his strength. He gets up from the ground, he holds his back and says, Oh my son Ali Akbar, give me a shout and let me hear your voice. At the moment I can't even see in front of me. He gets up, walks a few steps. A father in desperation to go his son, he sits down. He takes a few more steps and he sits down again. Before his eyes it's all darkness. He comes, he sees his son rubbing his feet on the ground in pain. He says, Ali Akbar, what has happened to your chest? He moves his hand, he sees a spear has pressed right through the chest of his son. A father sees his son desperately moving his leg in pain. He says, Ali Akbar, let me take that spear out of your chest. He looks towards Kufa and says, Ya Ali, adrikni. And he pulls the broken spear. A fountain of blood oozes. It goes all over his body. He takes Ali Akbar's head, puts the dying head of his son on his knees. A father's last act and wish. Ali Akbar, can you see me? Ali Akbar breathes his last breath. Imam Husayn, as a father, kisses his forehead. Beta Ali Akbar, my son Ali Akbar, my son Ali Akbar. It's a body of a strong man. Imam Husayn is an old man. He has to bring the body of his son from the battlefield alone to the tent where his sister Zainab is waiting desperately. Sometimes he carries it, sometimes he drags it. He comes near the tent and asks, "Oh, the children of Banu Hashim, come and help me." You know, little children from the tent run out. Some are holding Ali Akbar's hand, some his head, some his feet. Little children, with the help of the Imam Husayn, bring the lasha, the body of Ali Akbar, into the tent. Wali Akbara, Wali Akbara, Wali Akbara. The ladies of the household of Ahlul Bayt beat their head and chest and say, Wali Akbar. When we wanted to see our great prophet, we used to look at your face. When we wanted to remember his voice, we used to remember your azan. Wali Akbara, Wali Akbara. And this way, the young warrior from the household of Imam Husayn gives the best of all he had. Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un.